Listeners, it's Vanessa. Exciting news. Parcast's first book, Cults Inside the World's Most Notorious Groups and Understanding the People Who Join Them, is now available for pre-order at parcast.com/cults. Thanks to your support, we've compiled years of research, insights, and a catalog of case studies to expose more about these cults and the people behind them than ever before. Details which haven't even been explored in our Cults podcast. Visit parcast.com/cults to pre-order your copy. Inside the World's Most Notorious Groups and Understanding the People Who Join them.
Hi listeners, it's Carter, here to tell you about an incredible event celebrating the launch of Parcast's first book, Cults. On July 13th, crime junkies Ashley Flowers and Parcast founder Max Cutler are coming together for a night of true crime to remember. And you can be part of it virtually on Spotify Live or in person. The evening will take Los Angeles and feature discussions about the book, a live Q&A, and so much more. All ticket sales up to $125,000 will be matched by Max Cutler and donated to Season of Justice, a nonprofit founded by Ashley Flowers that provides financial resources to help solve cold cases and support families impacted by unsolved violent crimes. It's a wonderful cause and an evening perfect for any true crime fan. But time is running out. Register for your spot today at parcast.com/cults. All attendees will receive a special signed copy of Parcast's new book, Cults. So don't wait. Sign up at parcast.com/cults.
Due to the graphic nature of this dictator's crimes, listener discretion is advised. This episode includes discussions of murder and anti-Semitism. We advise extreme caution for children under 13.
In the late 1920s, fascist leader Adolf Hitler brought his Nazi party to power in Germany. One of the most insidious tenets of Nazism was the belief in the superiority of the so-called Aryan race.
Hitler defined it as tall, blonde, blue-eyed Nordic peoples. He sought to conquer Europe and then expel anyone that didn't meet these narrow Aryan ideals.
But he also knew he couldn't create his Aryan utopia alone. To carry out his barbaric goals, he needed loyal believers who were as fanatical as he was. He sought out men who were willing to do anything for his Third Reich.
In 1929, he put an ambitious young Nazi named Heinrich Himmler in charge of the fledgling Schutzstaffel, or SS. Initially created to serve as Hitler's bodyguards, the SS were destined to be the most elite paramilitary unit in Germany.
At Hitler's side was Reinhard Heydrich. While he was initially reluctant to join the Nazi Party, Heydrich became one of the most powerful officers in the SS. His brutal actions eventually earned him the nickname Hitler's Hangman.
Under Himmler and Heydrich, SS officer Otto Skorzeny rose to command a historic Special Forces operation. He was obsessed with seeking glory in battle. Under his command, the SS carried out covert missions that aimed to win World War II for the Axis powers.
Together, these three men fought to create the fascist Aryan world Hitler envisioned, and their cruelty led to the deaths of millions. Welcome, Dictators, a Spotify original from Parcast. I'm Richard.
And I'm Kate. You can find all episodes of Dictators and all other Spotify originals from Parcast for free on Spotify.
This season on Dictators, we're taking a look at Hitler's henchmen. These officers helped the Nazi leader build his regime and spread terror across Europe.
This week, we're exploring the rise of Heinrich Himmler, the leader of the SS. This eccentric bureaucrat ingratiated himself with prominent nationalists and leveraged his power to eliminate a rival paramilitary group, the SA.
Next week, we'll look at how Himmler used his position to promote his racist and anti-Semitic ideology, and in doing so, help organize the deaths of over 6 million European Jews.
We'll have all that and more coming up. Stay with us. This episode of Dictators is sponsored by BetterHelp. Look, there are times when it's hard to keep your brain in problem-solving mode, and you just need someone in your corner. Someone to help you work through things. A therapist can help you figure out what's causing you to feel the way you do, and they can help you figure out a solution, so you can accomplish your goals no matter how big or small they are. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, accessible, affordable, and it's entirely online. All you have to do is fill out a short survey, and you'll be matched with a licensed therapist that you can talk with via video, phone, or chat. Plus, you can easily switch therapists at any time. If you want to be a better problem solver, BetterHelp can help you get there. And right now, listeners can get 10% off their first month of therapy at betterhelp.com/parcast. That's betterhelp.com/parcast. This episode is brought to you by GNC. Ready to add a little something more to your daily routines? GNC has what you need to make things fun and fresh, like the GNC Women's Multivitamin Mixed Berry Gummies to help with your specific needs, or their Total Lean Whipped Chocolate Mousse Layered Bars, so you can maintain your healthy lifestyle and indulge your sweet tooth with something delicious. To make your routine anything but vanilla, head to GNC or visit gnc.com/podcast.
This episode is brought to you by True Classic. Men can't stop raving about True Classic's Ultra Soft Tea, designed to flatter all body types. And now, with their new active wear, you can take them on those challenging workouts. The active tea is moisture wicking and odor resistant. Plus, it fits tight around the arms and chest and loose around the stomach, so you're always highlighting your best attributes. Go to trueclassic.com today and use the promo code CLASSIC for 25% off. Tap the banner or click on this episode's page to learn more.
While there were several infamous officers in Adolf Hitler's inner circle, like Goering or Goebbels, Heinrich Himmler often wielded the most influence over Nazi policy.
Goering controlled the German military, but Himmler's elite SS units carried out the most dangerous special forces missions. And Himmler put Goebbels' fascist propaganda into action by creating the death camps of the Holocaust.
Yet for someone with so much power, Himmler's rise to the top seems almost inexplicable. He didn't look like Hitler's ideal Aryan, and he had almost no military experience.
However, Himmler distinguished himself behind the scenes as a Machiavellian opportunist and an unrepentant sycophant. He did whatever he could to rise to the top, no matter the cost.
He learned these skills almost from birth, as his family had plenty of experience ingratiating themselves with powerful people. Himmler's father, Gebhard, was the personal tutor to Prince Heinrich of Bavaria. When little Heinrich was born in 1900, Gebhard made sure to name him after his patron.
However, Gebhard wasn't so much a social climber as someone who wanted stability. Instead of collecting wealth or spending their evenings at court, the Himmlers were happy to maintain a middle-class existence.
Though the young Himmler was never left wanting, his childhood was anything but blissful. By most accounts, he was an above-average student, but lacked friends. He was often teased for his pale skin and stout stature.
Young Himmler was also constantly afflicted with indigestion, severe colds, and fevers. Such illnesses made it difficult for Himmler to engage in physical activity with his peers.
As a result, Himmler developed an inferiority complex. He was highly resentful and judgmental of those who refused to accept or include him.
In fact, much of his youth was spent on the sidelines, longing to participate with others. Above all, Himmler desperately wanted to fight in World War I.
From 1914 onward, Himmler's war diary entries reveal a teenager with a deep patriotic fervor. As a proud German, he vehemently hated the enemy Russian forces. He had little regard for any nation who didn't support Germany.
Furthermore, Himmler idolized German soldiers. They were brave, tough, and physically impressive. To him, they emulated the folk heroes from the German fables he read as a child.
He wanted to be a hero too. His jingoistic passions only increased when his older brother left for the Western Front in 1950.
As the war dragged on, it seemed as if Himmler would get his wish. In 1917, he was old enough to be accepted as an officer candidate in the German army. Himmler knew it was only a matter of time before he would be adorned in an officer's uniform and achieve glory in battle.
But while Himmler was still in training, Germany signed an armistice. The war was over. He would no longer be able to prove himself in combat.
Himmler grew resentful of his missed opportunity, and his resentment was only exacerbated by the aftermath of the war, as Germany was punished for its aggression.
The 1919 Treaty of Versailles placed the blame for World War I almost entirely on Germany. As a result, the government was forced to provide financial restitution to countries it has invaded, which put Germany deeply in debt almost overnight.
The treaty also forced Germany to diminish the government discharged hundreds of thousands of soldiers and officers, including Heinrich Himmler.
With a future as a soldier gone, 19-year-old Himmler opted to return to school. The same year he was discharged, Himmler enrolled at a technical university in Munich and studied agriculture.
Although he was still socially awkward, Himmler seemed eager to experience the life of a student and finally be accepted by his peers. At the time, the best way to do that was to join campus clubs and societies.
Most of these organizations were simply a means for students to drink, dance, or play sports. But Himmler had very little interest in the bacchanalia. Instead, he joined the Apollo Club, a society for more intellectually minded students.
The Apollo Club often engaged in spirited conversations on a variety of subjects. However, the most frequently discussed topic was the future of Germany. During these debates, Himmler's anti-Semitism suddenly emerged.
There's no indication that Himmler exhibited signs of fervent anti-Semitism as a youth. Rather, it appears that once he went to college, he read books that promoted anti-Jewish stereotypes and adopted these views as his own.
And like most anti-Semites at this time, he blamed the Jews for Germany's defeat in World War I, as well as the nation's inability to recover economically.
This anti-Semitic turn led him toward far-right politics. His Apollo Club debates became increasingly militant, especially about the sanctity of so-called traditional German values.
Above all, he was concerned with the role of women in society. He resented the fact that they no longer seemed focused on traditional roles and would rather spend time going out and having fun. In fact, Himmler's rhetoric and obsession over women would fit the modern definition of an incel.
Although there was an increase in far-right rhetoric throughout post-war Germany, many of Himmler's peers didn't subscribe to his beliefs. To defend against their derision, he tried to project the image of a misunderstood intellectual.
But he fell short. While Himmler was intellectually curious, he wasn't a critical reader and often fell for reductive conspiracy theories. As a result, few college peers took him seriously.
The rejection wasn't lost on Himmler. Even in Himmler's diary entries, he acknowledges that his classmates disliked him.
Yet, he refused to change. Instead, Himmler embraced their rejection. It gave him an excuse to grow angrier at the liberal side of German society.
By 1922, Himmler was a committed far-right nationalist. He devoured pamphlets and periodicals that espoused anti-Semitism and the alleged superiority of the German and Nordic races.
However, his reading only provided so much support. Himmler wanted to act on his beliefs. And while his classmates disagreed with his radical views, Himmler soon discovered that there were plenty of Germans who believed as he did.
After the war, the German monarchy ceased to exist. For the first time, this opened up an opportunity for democracy. Unfortunately, extremists on both sides sought to take power, resulting in an unstable government.
With the economy spiraling, inflation out of control, and unemployment rising, many Germans turned to the far right. To them, Germany was in the midst of existential war, and the only way to win was to defeat their perceived enemies, the communists and the Jews.
Himmler wanted to be a part of this movement, so he surrounded himself with people who thought exactly as he did. He frequently attended nationalist meetings throughout Munich.
It was at one such gathering where he met 35-year-old Ernst Röhm. Röhm was an outspoken army captain with a magnetic personality. More importantly, he was one of the leading voices in the growing far-right movement.
It didn't take long for Himmler to idolize Röhm. The army veteran personified all the qualities and characteristics that Himmler held most sacred. So in August 1922, 21-year-old Himmler joined one of Röhm's conservative groups, the Reichskriegsflagge.
The organization was one of several ultra-nationalist groups that existed at the time. Although they each had different names, their goal was ultimately the same: to seize power in Germany.
Eventually, it became obvious to the individual leaders that the best way forward was to consolidate their groups. As these far-right groups united, Himmler met another prominent nationalist, Adolf Hitler. Their meeting was the first step towards Himmler's future as a leader and the destruction of Europe.
Coming up, Himmler finds acceptance among the newly formed Nazi Party.
Hi, listeners. It's Carter with some truly exciting news. To commemorate the launch of Cults, Parcast's first book, crime junkies Ashley Flowers and Parcast founder Max Cutler are coming together on July 13th for an in-person and virtual experience you do not want to miss. The evening will take place in Los Angeles and feature a live Q&A about the book, an exclusive meet and greet, and a discussion on all things true crime. All ticket sales up to $125,000 will be matched by Max Cutler and donated to Season of Justice, a nonprofit founded by Ashley that provides funding to law enforcement agencies and families to help solve cold cases. It's an amazing organization, near and dear to both Ashley and Max, and another great reason to enjoy this wonderful night. And it's just days away, so visit parcast.com/cults to register today. You can also catch the event virtually on Spotify Live if you were unable to join us in person. All attendees will get a signed copy of the book and a night they'll never forget. July 13th is fast approaching, so be sure to join Ashley Flowers and Max Cutler for a very special evening celebrating the release of Parcast's new book, Cults, all for an incredible cause. Register today at parcast.com/cults.
This episode is brought to you by Beauty Counter. Beauty Counter is on a mission to get safer products into the hands of everyone. And this year, Beauty Counter has the perfect gift for every beauty lover in your life. With its biggest sale of the year starting on November 14th. There's no better time to make the switch to beauty that's better for you and the planet. Head to beautycounter.com to get started. And use code CHOOSEBEAUTY for 20% off your first time purchase.
Well, you don't have to have that space. At the South Pole of the North Pole.
Now back to the story.
Don't give me any shit.
After a brief stint in the German army at the end of World War I, Heinrich Himmler went to university in Munich. During his studies, he came to embrace anti-Semitism and far-right politics. When he graduated in 1922, he joined Ernst Röhm's ultra-nationalist Reichskriegsflagge.
Despite joining Röhm's group, Himmler wasn't fully committed to activism yet. Rather, he split his time working as a lab assistant at a factory outside of Munich.
Still, Himmler couldn't deny that conservative activism brought him something he always wanted. For years, he had struggled to connect or participate with others. But in joining Röhm, Himmler finally found the camaraderie he desperately craved.
However, while Himmler made inroads with the Reichskriegsflagge, he encountered another, more right-wing group, the National Socialists, or Nazis.
Himmler was enthralled by the Nazis' charismatic leader, Adolf Hitler, though he was still loyal to Ernst Röhm. Though Hitler and Röhm led different fascist organizations, they shared a mutual admiration for one another. They soon realized it would be in their best interests to form an alliance. Hitler, in particular, knew that Röhm's military connections could be useful for the future.
Even more importantly, Röhm was in control of a second powerful group, the Sturmabteilung, or SA. Commonly referred to as the Brown Shirts, the SA was a loosely organized militia of violent thugs. They were mostly known for brawling in the streets with their political enemies.
With Hitler and Röhm talking about joining forces, Himmler decided to bridge the gap himself. So in August 1923, he became a member of the Nazi Party.
A month later, on September 30th, 1923, Hitler, Röhm, and the leaders of other right-wing organizations formally merged into a coalition called the Kampfbund. Essentially, this was done to streamline the movement and expedite their agenda.
That agenda, of course, was to take control of Germany, and they even had a model to follow. 2 years before, in 1921, Italian fascist Benito Mussolini and his black shirts marched on Rome and seized power in a bloodless coup. Hitler and Rome were inspired to initiate their own revolution.
On November 8th, 1923, thousands of armed Nazis descended on one of Munich's largest beer halls. Hitler hoped that the fragile government and the growing tide of populism would inspire the people to join his ranks. In a passionate speech, he laid out his plan to take over the state of Bavaria and then the rest of the nation.
But the beer hall patrons were unimpressed, and Hitler didn't add to his numbers. The following day, when the Nazis marched on the Bavarian Defense Ministry, they were driven back after a gun battle with state police.
Though Himmler was present during the gunfight, there's little indication that he actually fought. His only job during the failed insurrection was as a flag bearer.
Unlike Mussolini's March on Rome, the beer hall putsch was a disaster. While Himmler escaped the police, Hitler and Röhm were both arrested for organizing the putsch, though only Hitler went to prison.
Meanwhile, the government banned the Nazi Party. Now, anyone who had been a party member was essentially blacklisted from society. Himmler felt the effects of the ban immediately. He was fired from his lab assistant job and forced to move back home with his parents.
Still, Himmler viewed the putsch less as a failure and more as a turning point in his life. He believed that Rome and Hitler had been railroaded by the authorities, and he vowed to overthrow the government at all costs.
For Himmler, political activism was no longer a part-time hobby. It was his life's purpose.
Though the government outlawed the Nazi Party, many politicians still feared the fascists, and some even harbored sympathetic beliefs. This became even more true just a year later, when far-right political parties gained seats in Germany's parliament during the 1924 elections.
Instead of angering the fascists, the changing government increasingly catered to them. That same year, authorities released Hitler from prison early and reversed the ban on the Nazi Party.
Undeterred by the lost year, Hitler began rebuilding the party, and Heinrich Himmler devoted himself to the effort.
However, this meant separating himself from Röhm. By the time Hitler left prison, he and Röhm had a minor falling out. Though the two remained friends, Röhm opted to focus his time leading the paramilitary SA instead of bolstering a legitimate political party.
Meanwhile, Himmler sought a new mentor to help him rise in the Nazi ranks, so he latched on to Gregor Strasser.
Gregor Strasser was one of the highest-ranking Nazis under Hitler. During Hitler's imprisonment, Strasser kept the party's political wing united across various locales. After Hitler's release, Strasser continued to be instrumental in the Nazis' grassroots organization efforts.
Strasser hired Himmler to be his secretary, which was something of an all-purpose assistant job. One of Himmler's duties was to ride around the country and inspect the Nazis' hidden weapon caches.
By now, Himmler considered himself a Nazi soldier, and these menial inspections were part of the job. He still sought military glory, and his dedication to the cause was palpable. So much so that Strasser promoted Himmler to party organizer.
In this role, Himmler traveled around Germany and met with every fascist organization he could. It was his job to convince them all to unify under a single Nazi banner.
To bolster his effectiveness, Himmler blitzed the various towns he visited with Nazi propaganda. He plastered posters on every city wall and had speakers and canvassers spread positive news about the Nazi Party.
Once again, Himmler's dedication and organizational skills were rewarded. In September 1927, he was made second in command of a small paramilitary wing of the SA called the Schutzstaffel, or SS.
The SS was created in November 1925 to act as Hitler's personal bodyguards during major events and rallies. Unfortunately for the budding political party, despite the inherent prestige the job provided, membership was consistently low. By 1927, there were only 168 members.
But Himmler was determined to turn this subpar team into an elite unit. Though he was technically just a middle manager, Himmler saw his new role as that of a drill sergeant. From uniform inspections to participating in drills, he made sure that every SS member looked and acted like a real soldier.
Hitler immediately noticed Himmler's new reforms and how quickly he was able to whip the SS into shape. Like Strasser, Hitler saw how useful Himmler was to the Nazi mission. For his undying loyalty and devotion, Hitler soon referred to Himmler as, quote, faithful Heinrich.
But despite Himmler's fervent dedication to the SS, it was still considered a tiny, obscure group within the larger Nazi movement. The unit continued to have little use beyond protecting Hitler at political events. While Himmler nearly doubled the size of the SS, there were still fewer than 300 members in 1928.
As it turned out, Hitler wanted to transform the SS into more than just his protectors. The SS to become the Nazi version of a special forces unit.
And even though Himmler had zero combat experience, Hitler was confident that his organizing skills would translate into effective leadership. After all, he expanded party membership and tightened discipline within the SS.
So, on January 20th, 1929, Hitler promoted 28-year-old Himmler to Reichsfuhrer, the top commander of the SS.
The promotion was everything Himmler could have hoped for. Beyond his control over the SS, his command would be admired by everyone who questioned his toughness and qualifications. Not only that, his advancement also meant he could use the SS to further his insidious racial conspiracy theories.
Though it had been 7 years since Hitler first adopted his racist and anti-Semitic beliefs, he never once put them aside. In fact, as he climbed the ranks of the party, those beliefs only grew stronger. and more commonplace.
The theory of German genetic and racial superiority had been argued by fringe thinkers and authors for years. However, as National Socialism expanded across Germany and Western Europe, those fringe beliefs turned mainstream.
The most popular theories noted that Germans were, by and large, descended from Scandinavians and Vikings. The authors lauded the ancient Vikings for their advancements in culture, religion, and their skills on the battlefield. Their physical features, notably blonde hair and blue eyes, were considered ideal.
But another group that played a major role in the conspiracy theories was the Teutonic Order, a medieval brotherhood of knights founded by German peasants. The Teutonic Order accompanied Christian soldiers during the Crusades.
Himmler used this sort of propaganda to indoctrinate SS members. He taught recruits that they were genetically advantaged and entitled. Himmler claimed that since Germans came from a long line of superior warriors, the SS was going to keep their tradition alive.
Himmler also subscribed to the theory that the so-called Aryan race had come under assault. He believed that Eastern European cultures would overtake and replace Germans. To him, the only way to prevent that was to breed new Aryan.
Thus, Himmler made it his personal mission to use the propagation and advancement of the Aryan race. And with the SS under his unilateral control, he enacted ridiculous breeding policies.
First, he appointed eugenicists and pseudoscientists to prominent roles and worked with them to establish criteria for who could enlist in the SS. This promoted tall, blonde, blue-eyed men who could prove their Aryan heritage.
Himmler also wanted to add a level of sophistication to the SS to separate them from the garish thugs of the SA brown shirts. So he condensed the Nazi ideology into a set of moral, physical, and military tenets.
These were designed to appeal to the more educated sector of German society. Himmler hoped to add more prestige to the SS and entice more Aryan members.
But these new policies weren't intended only for SS men, since breeding required women. While he already had a very low opinion of women, Himmler sought to control the private lives of his men and their mates.
In 1931, Himmler enacted the marriage law of the SS. Under this rule, every SS man who wanted to get married needed the relationship approved by Himmler or another high-ranking officer.
For the union to move forward, the couple had to provide genealogical records that demonstrated pure Aryan blood. To ensure that so-called purity, those records had to go as far back as 1750, nearly 2 centuries.
The irony behind these strict rules was the fact that Himmler's wife, Margareta, didn't meet the criteria. She was of Slavic descent. More than anything, this showed that Himmler and other Nazi leaders often bent the rules to fit their own desires.
But Himmler didn't stop at the marriage law. If an SS man couldn't find a wife, Himmler would do it for them. He established several bride schools, which taught women the basics of child-rearing and homekeeping to ensure their Nazi husbands were happy.
While Himmler worked toward a Nazi future, most Germans refused to take the Nazis seriously, or at least did their best to ignore them. Many believed that if no one paid too much attention, the fascists would eventually go away.
Unfortunately, as the 1920s gave way to the 1930s, more Germans embraced Nazi ideology due to the nation's continued economic troubles. Hitler's rousing speeches provided scapegoats for them to blame.
Soon, the Nazi Party catapulted from the fringe to the mainstream. As Hitler's prominence increased, the stage was set for Himmler to become one of the most influential men in Germany.
Coming up, the Nazis seize control, and Himmler makes the SS more powerful than ever.
This episode is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. If you're hiring, you probably know how challenging the hiring process is, especially when you're trying to find someone who will be a great fit for the role and the company. Whether you're looking for a civil engineer, attorney, accountant, nurse, zoologist, or even a new mascot, ZipRecruiter can help you find qualified candidates fast. And right now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/crime. So, how does it work? Well, whatever role you're hiring for, ZipRecruiter's matching technology finds people with the right experience for your job and sends them to you. Then you can invite your top choices to apply. It's so effective that 4 out of 5 employers get a quality candidate within the first day. Remember, right now you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/crime. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/CRIME. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
This episode is brought to you by GNC. Ready to add a little something more to your daily routines? GNC has what you need to make things fun and fresh, like the GNC Women's Multivitamin Mixed Berry Gummies to help with your specific needs, or their totally rich chocolate mousse layered bars, so you can maintain your healthy lifestyle and indulge your sweet tooth with something delicious. To make your routine anything but vanilla, head to GNC or visit GNC.com/podcast. Now back to the story.
In 1929, 28-year-old Heinrich Himmler became head of the SS, a small paramilitary unit within the SA. Despite its size, Himmler knew he could transform it into the Nazis' most elite corps. He also used the SS as a means to fulfill the Nazi desire for Aryan superiority in Germany.
Hitler put his faith in Himmler's ability to turn the SS around, and by 1932, Himmler proved that the Nazi leader had chosen the right man.
When Himmler inherited the SS in 1929, it numbered less than 300 men. 3 years later, that number had grown to almost 30,000. The rise in SS membership also coincided with increasing popularity of the Nazi Party.
As Germany's weak economy continued to decline, many citizens grew disillusioned with the liberal government. Others feared a possible rise in communism.
To them, the Nazi Party provided a viable, unified alternative to both. Yet despite the Nazis appearing like a unified party, there was plenty of internal strife.
Behind the scenes, there were tremendous amounts of infighting among senior members. The timing of these power struggles was terrible, especially as the Nazis made major gains in parliament.
The 1932 elections resulted in the Nazis receiving 37.3% of the vote. Though they were the strongest party in parliament, they didn't have a majority. As such, some Nazi officials believed they should form a coalition, including Himmler's former boss, Gregor Strasser.
Since Himmler's time working for him, Strasser had become one of the leading Nazis in government. He believed that the only way for the Nazis to exert power was if they joined forces with other conservative parties. But Hitler vehemently refused. In response, Strasser resigned.
Most Nazis, including Himmler, supported Hitler's decision. However, some believed that Strasser's resignation might split the party and condemn any chance at ruling Germany.
Strasser's resignation even made some Nazis question their faith in Hitler as their leader. If he was unable to control men like Strasser, where did that leave the future of the party?
Instead of letting the party splinter, Hitler took action. Throughout January 1933, he and Himmler negotiated with political leaders and influential industrialists to put Hitler in power alone.
They finally acquiesced, and on January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor.
After years of chaos and infighting, the Nazis were on top of the German government. There was no way Hitler was going to let that power slip away, so he turned to Himmler and the SS.
In the months that followed, the SS went after the Nazis' political enemies. In particular, Himmler set his sights on the two parties who could most legitimately threaten Nazi power, the Communists and the Social Democrats.
Himmler's SS officers rounded up and arrested these dissidents, and he suggested using concentration camps to house thousands of new political prisoners.
One of the first and most infamous camps was Dachau, which opened its gates around April 1933. These camps were wholly controlled by the SS.
Himmler's men personally guarded the barbed wire fences and quickly earned a reputation for brutal mistreatment of the prisoners.
Torture was common, and Himmler fully supported its implementation. To him, it was a practical method to elicit confessions or scare political enemies into abandoning their activism altogether.
Himmler displayed no empathy for his fellow man, or women and children, if they were perceived as a threat to Hitler's rule. This cruelty pleased Hitler and ensured Himmler's position as head of the SS.
As the Nazis continued to consolidate their power over Germany, 33-year-old Himmler moved to take over the German police system. Himmler and his protege, a former naval commander named Reinhard Heydrich, commandeered Germany's individual state police forces. They united them under the SS to form the Gestapo.
Between Himmler and Heydrich, the SS quickly functioned as the Nazis' eyes and ears across Germany. They instilled fear throughout the entire nation.
By the beginning of 1934, the SS numbered around 200,000 men, a massive growth from when Himmler took over the unit 5 years earlier.
The success wasn't lost upon Himmler. In fact, as the SS grew, so did his ego. He claimed to be the modern incarnation of the leader of the Teutonic Order.
Himmler believed that his objective was similar to that of the Teutonic Knights 1,000 years before. Although instead of conquering the Holy Land for Christendom, the Nazis' crusade was to conquer the world.
However, there was someone standing in the Nazis' way. It wasn't a communist or a social democrat, or even a rival nation. It was a powerful member within the party, Ernst Röhm, the man whom Himmler had first aligned with back in 1922.
During the Nazis' early years, Röhm's SA had proven useful fighting against the communists in the streets. But now, such violence and intimidation undermined the public's perception of the Nazis as a serious organization.
In the wake of seizing power, Hitler grew to distrust Röhm and his brown shirts. Like many Nazis, Hitler saw them as a dangerous and unorganized band of thugs.
And since Himmler had completely devoted himself to Hitler, he was more than willing to cast aside his former mentor. More importantly, Himmler's dreams of expanding the SS's reach meant removing the SA. And if that required eliminating Ernst Röhm, then so be it.
But despite all of his fears and distrust, Hitler was unable to simply get rid of Röhm. Deep down, Hitler still had a sense of loyalty toward the man. After all, they made their name together in the beer hall putsch a decade earlier.
Himmler realized that ousting Röhm would require giving Hitler more motivation. So, Himmler approached Hermann Göring, the president of parliament and governor of Prussia.
Göring was no fan of Röhm or the SA. He believed that they threatened his control over Prussia, as well as the stability of the Nazi Party. Göring also despised Röhm's intentions to use the SA to create a new army, one which uprooted military traditions.
With all that in mind, Himmler and Göring joined forces, and at the end of spring 1934, they conspired to finally take down Ernst Röhm.
Himmler, Göring, and Himmler's deputy Heydrich made a list of prominent SA officers. Then, They compiled evidence against each one to convince Hitler that Röhm wanted to overthrow him.
None of the evidence was true. Röhm, in fact, was not making any plans for a sudden coup, but Hitler believed Himmler and Goering, and at the end of June, he decided to strike.
On June 30th, 1934, Hitler traveled to a hotel where Röhm and other SA leaders were vacationing. With SS commandos by his side, Hitler arrested Röhm and his men and denounced them as traitors.
Simultaneously, SS and Gestapo agents poured through Munich and Berlin and searched for SA officers. Some were arrested and thrown into prison, but many were murdered on the spot.
But this sudden bloody purge wasn't solely about ending the SA. Hitler also went after political enemies to settle old scores. Among the executed was Gregor Strasser, Himmler's old boss, who resigned from parliament after Hitler refused to form a coalition.
As the violence settled down, there was still the matter of what to do with Röhm, who was now in prison. But Hitler couldn't come to a decision. Even after all this, he still had a soft spot for him.
Himmler and Goering refused to let Röhm his way out of the purge. They convinced Hitler that Röhm needed to die.
Reluctantly, Hitler ordered that
Would you
Röhm
rather have a
take
guy
his
that's
own
porny
life,
to cheat on you?
but
Porny
Röhm
to
refused.
really, yeah.
So, Himmler ordered 2 of his SS officers to shoot Röhm in his cell.
The purge of the SA became known as the Night of the Long Knives. When all was said and done, between 80 and 200 men were executed.
The Night of the Long Knives had 2 drastic. First, completely consolidated Hitler's power over the Nazi Party.
The one with the
Forward,
circles.
no one dared challenge his supremacy.
Second, the purge made the SS the single elite paramilitary force for the party. As a reward for Himmler's loyalty, Hitler announced that the SS would become an independent organization, no longer a branch of the SA.
Heinrich Himmler was now one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. Unlike Ernst Röhm, he focused his power on the greater Nazi mission, to manifest Hitler's vision of an exclusively Aryan Europe.
And to that end, Himmler would use his position to orchestrate one of the worst genocides in human
Press this
history.
second.
Thanks for listening to Dictators. Next week, we'll explore Himmler's role in the Holocaust and the downfall of the Nazi leadership as their plans begin to collapse.
You can find all episodes of Dictators and all other Spotify originals from Parcast for free on Spotify.
See you next time.
Dictators is a Spotify original from Parcast. It is executive produced by Max Cutler, sound designed by Juan Borda, with production assistance by Ron Shapiro, Nick Johnson, Trent Williamson, and Carly Madden.
Metal.
This episode of Dictators was written by Tony Goodman, edited by Joe Guerra and Andrew Messer, fact-checked by Adriana Romero, researched by Bradley Klein, and produced by Bruce Katovich. Dictators stars Kate Leonard and Richard Rossner.
Hi, it's Carter here to remind you that a very special evening with crime junkies Ashley Flowers and Parcast founder Max Cutler is just days away. It's an event celebrating the release of Parcast's first book, Cults, and you can be a part of it virtually on Spotify Live or in person. The evening will take place in Los Angeles on July 13th and feature discussions about the book, a live Q&A, and more. Plus, all ticket sales up to $125,000 will be matched by Max Cutler and donated to Season of Justice, a nonprofit founded by Ashley Flowers that provides financial resources to help solve cold cases and support families impacted by unsolved violent crimes. This has all the makings of being the true crime event of the year, so don't miss out. Register for your spot today today at parcast.com/cults. All attendees will receive a special signed copy of Parcast's new book, Cults. That's parcast.com/cults to sign up today.
This episode is brought to you by Feeding America. Food is more than nourishment. It's how people connect. Yet 53 million people relied on charitable food assistance last year. This holiday season, you can help fill plates and hearts. Click or tap the banner to get involved. This episode is brought to you by ootd. It's time for the greatest mystery of all. Who keeps knocking the planters over on your front porch? Because you have ADD and their smart home security systems with Google Nest, the answer is pretty easy to figure out. The Google Nest doorbell lets you know what's happening at your front door from virtually anywhere. And the bird, turns out, it's the neighborhood stray cat. Help protect what matters most with all the smart devices you need, plus 24/7 professional monitoring from ootd and a little help from Google. To see how ADD can help make your home smarter and safer, visit ADD.com.
Hi, Parcast listeners. It's Vanessa with some incredible news. You can purchase your copy of our book, Cults, Inside the World's Most Notorious Groups and Understanding the People Who Joined Them, available now at parcast.com/cults. Cults is an expanded look at the people who led and followed the most radical exploration into what happens when the most vulnerable recesses of the mind are twisted into the lowest forms of malevolence. Details not featured on our podcasts. We're so proud to bring you this fantastic compilation of stories, and we're forever grateful for your support. Without you, none of this would be possible, so thank you. Visit parcast.com/cults to order your copy of Cults, Inside the World's Most Notorious Groups and Understanding the People Who Joined Them. That's parcast.com/cults to order today.
Due to the graphic nature of this dictator's crimes, listener discretion is advised. This episode includes discussions of murder, sexual assault, and anti-Semitism. We advise extreme caution for children under 13.
In August 1941, 40-year-old Heinrich Himmler was in Minsk, Belarus, inspecting a Nazi concentration camp. Nearly all the prisoners he watched through the barbed wire fence were either Jews or Soviet prisoners of war.
During the inspection, Himmler wanted to see how his men eliminated their prisoners. He had 100 Jewish men and women lined up along a trench outside the camp for a demonstration.
Himmler approached a young man in the line and asked him if his ancestors were Jewish. He answered yes, and Himmler responded, quote, "Then there's nothing I can do for you."
Moments later, Himmler watched as his SS officers executed the young man and the other 99 innocent victims.
After Himmler witnessed the massacre, he felt nauseous. However, he wasn't disgusted by the murders. Rather, he was disgusted at the trauma the killing caused his men. To Himmler, he and the SS were the victims.
After the massacre, he vowed to find a more efficient method for mass murder. He wanted to make executions easier on the SS soldiers shaken by the experience.
In doing so, he implemented the Nazis' so-called final solution against European Jews, known today as the Holocaust. Welcome to Dictators, a Spotify original from Parcast. I'm Richard.
And I'm Kate. You can find all episodes of Dictators and all other Spotify originals from Parcast for free on Spotify.
This season on Dictators, we're taking a look at Hitler's head. These officers helped the Nazi leader build his regime and spread terror across Europe.
Last week, we followed Heinrich Himmler's rise from a far-right university radical to a leading member of the Nazi Party. We looked at how he transformed the disorderly SS unit into an elite paramilitary organization.
We'll explore Himmler's murderous reign as one of the principal architects of the Holocaust, as well as the inept series of actions that led to his downfall.
We'll return to Nazi Germany right after this.
After Germany's defeat in World War I, the nation's government and economy were in shambles. Inflation soared, unemployment was common, and citizens were frustrated by politicians who seemed incapable of fixing the country.
This chaos allowed fascist rhetoric to take hold, and Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime rose out of the turmoil. By 1933, Hitler had taken power and used violence to hold on to it. Thousands of communists and social democrats were sent to concentration camps, many of whom were summarily executed.
The Nazi officer who led this wave of terror was 32-year-old Heinrich Himmler. His paramilitary organization, the Schutzstaffel, or SS, carried out Hitler's orders with utter savagery.
Within a few short years, Himmler had transformed the SS from Hitler's bodyguards into the Nazi Party's most elite soldiers. He also seized Germany's various state police forces and unified them under the SS.
In June 1934, Himmler solidified his position with a purge known as the Night of the Long Knives. The SS killed current or former party members who posed any perceived threat to their power. In particular, Himmler took down the rival Nazi paramilitary group, the SA.
With the purge complete, there was no other party organization who stood in Himmler's way to control all German police. The SS were now Nazi Germany's eyes, ears, and muscle.
However, this broad police power made the German military nervous.
Many of Germany's military leaders were sympathetic to the Nazi cause, but they were concerned about the level of violence perpetrated by the party.
They feared that the SS could ignite a serious conflict that would put innocent Germans in jeopardy. This all led the military to question why they needed a paramilitary at all.
To justify the power of the SS, Himmler and his deputy, Reinhard Heydrich, claimed that only they could defeat Germany's greatest domestic enemy, the Jewish people. Instead of communists and social democrats, Himmler portrayed Jews as the #1 threat to Nazism.
This totally false assertion was a facet of the replacement theory that had consumed Himmler since his university days. Now, he publicly advocated for the forced imprisonment of Jews to end their encroachment on German soil.
Within a year, he and Heydrich convinced Hitler to pass stricter laws against the Jewish people.
These were called the Nuremberg Laws, and they weren't the first anti-Jewish actions Hitler decreed once in power. In 1933, he declared that all non-Aryans, namely Jews, were no longer allowed to hold various professional jobs. Now, 2 years later, Jews were no longer recognized as German citizens, and interracial marriage between Germans and Jews was outlawed.
The Nuremberg Laws also served to normalize the persecution and abuse of Germany's Jewish citizens. Jewish businesses faced increased boycotts or outright appropriation by Germans. Throughout Munich and Berlin, Nazi thugs openly assaulted Jewish people in the streets.
The sudden wave of persecution seemed to temper the tensions between the SS and the military. In essence, a line had been drawn. While the military handled Hitler's foreign threats, SS violence supposedly protected Germany from within.
As the discrimination against Jews reached a fever pitch, Himmler spent most of his time doing the kind of bureaucratic work that had propelled him to the top. Now that he had organized the police apparatus to Hitler's liking, He focused on constructing more concentration camps, and not just for Jews or communists.
In the mid-1930s, the Nazis broadened the definition of a criminal. Beyond actual crimes, the Nazis outlawed homosexuality, sex work, and unemployment. By the end of 1937, roughly 500,000 alleged criminals had been convicted.
As such, Himmler needed space to lock them up, so he kept building camps. These efforts were a major part of the Nazi quest for pan-Germanism, or the unification of all Germanic peoples under the Third Reich. By weeding out so-called undesirables, the Nazis sought to establish a pure, dominant, and unified Germanic race.
But the Nazis didn't intend for this race to remain solely within Germany's current borders. For his Aryan utopia to succeed, Hitler needed more living space, or Lebensraum, and that required expanding into more territory.
On March 12, 1938, Hitler annexed Austria with virtually no resistance. This action was known as the Anschluss. For years, many Austrians desperately wanted unification with Germany, and the Anschluss gave it to them.
As they did in Germany, the SS stormed through Austria and arrested political enemies. Nearly 80,000 Austrian Jews, communists, and liberals were arrested and sent to Himmler's camps in Germany.
6 months after the Anschluss, Hitler partitioned a section of Czechoslovakia known as the Sudetenland. It was home to nearly 3 million Germans, and Hitler claimed he was simply taking back what already belonged to Germany.
However, with the acquisition of new land, the Third Reich now had more alleged enemies living within its borders, especially Jews. As the Nazis seized more territory, Jewish persecution rose, culminating in a massacre known as a pogrom.
In early November 1938, a Polish Jew named Herschel Grinchbahn assassinated a Nazi diplomat in Paris. Grinchbahn's family had recently been deported from Germany, and Grinchbahn sought revenge. But his plan backfired.
On November 9th, Nazi leaders moved against German Jews in response to the assassination. That evening, anti-Jewish demonstrations broke out across Germany and other occupied territory. Much of the violence was encouraged or aided by members of the SS.
Thousands of Jewish homes and businesses were destroyed, and Jewish men, women, and children were attacked. By the end of the night, 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and shipped off to Himmler's camps. This pogrom became known as Kristallnacht.
Now under Himmler's charge, these prisoners were tortured and put to work with forced labor. For the most part, this labor consisted of enlarging the camps or quarrying stone for Himmler's prized headquarters called Wewelsburg Castle.
However, the principal Nazi goal for the forced labor wasn't a castle or a camp. Rather, Jewish prisoners were used to aid Hitler's takeover of Europe.
In 1939, Hitler decided to continue expanding Germany's living space further east. The annexations of Austria and the Sudetenland were only the beginning. Now he set his sights on Poland.
However, seizing Poland wasn't going to be as easy as Austria. Poland had an alliance with Britain and France, and they promised to support Poland against Nazi aggression. Thus, Hitler needed a pretext for an invasion, so Himmler and his subordinates created one. They even called it Operation Himmler.
Throughout the summer of 1939, Hitler made several speeches claiming that Polish officials had advocated violence against German citizens. Of course, these statements were completely false.
Then, on August 31st, 1939, SS troops dressed in Polish military uniforms conducted a series of phony raids on various German civil and government buildings in Poland. They randomly fired shots in the air or vandalized the structures, terrifying the local German people.
Of course, since Hitler claimed the Poles were violent toward Germans, the Nazis needed bodies as proof. So they hauled in dead prisoners from concentration camps and left them behind.
Hitler used Himmler's false flag operations as justification to invade Poland on September 1st, 1939. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II had begun.
For Himmler, World War II was a catalyst for his vision of an Aryan paradise. Because he believed that Germans were genetically superior, he believed the military would easily conquer Europe. Thus, Himmler didn't see his war as being fought on the front lines. Instead, he turned his attention to an insidious operation at home.
In October 1939, Hitler ordered Himmler to carry out the forced executions of Germans of all ages suffering from severe mental and physical disabilities. Himmler was to murder anyone who didn't fit his criteria of pure Aryan.
He hired as many willing doctors and nurses as he could to euthanize these unsuspecting victims using toxic gas. By the end of the war, 60,000 disabled Germans had been murdered.
While Himmler organized the Nazis' first genocide, the German military steamrolled through Europe. Throughout 1939 and 1940, German troops swept through Poland, Denmark, Belgium, Norway, and France.
In most countries, Jews were shipped off to Himmler's concentration camps. But Poland was a little different. The Nazi plan was to break up the country into designated territories for resettlement. Jews were to be crammed into small ghettos, while German citizens took over former Jewish homes.
However, the logistics for transporting and housing nearly 400,000 Polish Jews proved to be impossible as the war raged on. So Himmler and his deputy Heydrich looked for alternative places to send them. They turned their eyes further east, and, as it just so happened, so did Hitler.
On June 22, 1941, the Nazis launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Himmler knew that Barbarossa would result in even more prisoners. Since he couldn't hold all of them, Himmler pivoted to a new goal. He developed a plan to eliminate them, and he called it the final solution.
Coming up, Himmler's initiative morphs into genocide.
Hi listeners, it's Vanessa. I'm so excited to tell you that our first book is on sale now. This is such a big moment for the whole Parcast family, and we can't wait for you to read it. It's called Cults, Inside the World's Most Notorious Groups and Understanding the People Who Join Them. And you can purchase it today by visiting parcast.com/cults. This is a passion project, years in the making, and only made possible by you. With your support, we've been able to get back to our storytelling roots, this time with a wealth of research and insights under our belt and intimate details not covered on our podcast before. Shame, exploitation, power. Cults unfolds the many motives behind groups like NXIVM, Heaven's Gate, the People's Temple, and more, revealing eye-opening details which will surprise even the most devoted true crime fan. Visit parcast.com/cults to order your copy of Cults, Inside the World's Most Notorious Groups and Understanding the People Who Join Them. That's parcast.com/cults. And on behalf of everyone here at Parcast, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you enjoy.
Now back to the story.
In 1941, the Nazis had successfully taken over most of Europe. Meanwhile, 40-year-old Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, was tasked with imprisoning Germany's enemies in concentration camps.
However, by the summer, Himmler realized that he had a logistical problem. There simply wasn't enough infrastructure to handle the millions of prisoners classified as enemies under the Nazis' criteria. especially the Jews.
This problem was exacerbated by the June invasion of the Soviet Union, which resulted in even more prisoners. After the invasion, Himmler focused on a new plan for eliminating prisoners. At his headquarters at Wewelsburg Castle, he told his senior officers that their goal was to, quote, decimate the Slav population by 30 million.
While Himmler's SS troops never had an issue with murdering civilians, during the Soviet invasion, their depravity reached new lows. In addition to rounding up hundreds of thousands of prisoners, Nazi death squads known as Einsatzgruppen murdered tens of thousands of innocent Soviet citizens.
These massacres happened all over Eastern Europe. In many cases, the SS forced their victims to dig enormous ditches before killing and burying them inside the mass grave they had just dug.
Himmler actually witnessed one of the massacres take place near a concentration camp outside of Minsk, Belarus. The experience had a profound effect on him. Not only did blood get all over his uniform, but it was allegedly the first time he had seen a dead body.
Himmler noticed he wasn't the only one shaken by the incident. He observed that his SS executioners had similar reactions. However, this wasn't out of empathy for the victims. Every killing was done personally by an SS trooper, and Himmler believed it was exhausting his men, so he devised a less direct method of murder.
After using toxic gas to euthanize Germany's disabled population, Himmler decided to use the same method against Jews, Soviets, Slavs, Roma, and any other so-called enemies. Himmler believed it would be more efficient and more humane for his executioners.
In fall 1941, Himmler ordered his subordinates to begin constructing gas chambers at several concentration camps, most notably at Auschwitz in Poland.
Himmler chose Auschwitz as his primary center of mass extermination for several reasons. First, it wasn't on German soil. In his view, this meant the corpses wouldn't contaminate supposedly sacred Aryan ground.
Second, Auschwitz was located in a rural area on the banks of the Soa River. Therefore, it blended in with the surroundings and made escape virtually impossible, so he believed there would be little evidence of the mass murders.
Construction of the original gas chambers finished in early September 1941. Himmler used 600 Soviet prisoners of war and approximately 200 Polish citizens as test subjects to see which gas was the most efficient at killing. He ultimately settled on Zyklon B, a hydrogen cyanide-based chemical.
When Himmler built the gas chambers, they were wholly under the auspices of the SS. Official Nazi policy didn't mandate mass executions.
But by the end of 1941, the status of the war made the Nazi high command reconsider their official strategy.
That year, the Soviet Red Army managed to stop the German war machine from reaching Moscow. Then the United States entered World War II after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
Hitler's blitzkrieg had stalled, and a new enemy had emerged. With these new challenges, the Nazi leadership decided that the time had come to change state policy toward the Jewish population.
On January 20th, 1942, 15 of the highest-ranking SS officers gathered in the Berlin suburb of Wannsee. Led by Himmler's deputy Reinhard Heydrich, these 15 men ironed out the details of what became known as the final solution.
From this point forward, under the guise of forced labor and resettlement, the genocide of European Jews became the primary focus for the SS. The Nazis estimated that this would result in the deaths of 11 million people.
After the Wannsee Conference, Himmler ordered the construction of more camps and expanded those dedicated to extermination. Across Nazi territory, Jews, Soviets, and Roma were forced onto trains and sent to camps like Auschwitz.
Auschwitz was by far the largest and deadliest of Himmler's extermination centers. However, Himmler and his men generally conducted each murderous operation in the same barbaric fashion.
Upon arrival at the camps, prisoners were marched to wooden barracks. Those too weak to walk were carried by fellow prisoners. Once inside, camp guards forced the prisoners to undress. To encourage compliance and speed, the guards cruelly lied to the prisoners, saying they were preparing for disinfection baths.
Once undressed, the prisoners were taken to a chamber and locked inside. A few moments later, Zyklon B filled the room and killed all of the trapped prisoners.
When the killing session was over, a select group of other prisoners removed the bodies and took them to crematoriums. In an especially insidious move by the SS, the majority of these crematory workers were also Jewish.
Himmler believed that the cruelty perpetrated within the camps was necessary. In his mind, it was revenge for alleged Jewish encroachment on German lands. As such, he wanted the most fervent SS men participating in these atrocities.
Sadly, Himmler's men weren't content with organized mass murder. They found novel ways to torture and degrade their prisoners. Arbitrary executions were frequent. Rape, floggings, and other corporal punishments became common. However, the most depraved torture involved so-called medical experiments.
Himmler had already hired doctors willing to forcibly euthanize disabled Germans. Now, he demanded doctors use prisoners, including children, as test subjects for various experiments. Most of these were designed to see how much pain the human body could endure before death.
Himmler subscribed to the same pseudoscientific principles behind the theory of Aryan racial superiority. He believed these horrific projects would become significant to the scientific and medical communities.
These tests varied in their scope. For example, some prisoners were subjected to mustard gas in order to burn skin and determine how fast a burn spread.
Meanwhile, under the guise of aviation safety, Himmler and the German Air Force used prisoners to test how high a person could parachute from an airplane. They also constructed low-pressure chambers in order to see how little oxygen a person needed to live.
Himmler's doctors forced prisoners to face frigid temperatures to see how long they could survive or if they could be revived after freezing to death. They also made hypothermic victims attempt sexual intercourse to see if it would accelerate the warming process.
For many experiments, the goal seemed to be cruelty, not useful medical information. And as if these procedures weren't evil enough, Himmler's doctors conducted mass sterilizations.
For Himmler, the torture disguised as scientific experimentation gave him something he'd craved since he was a student: legitimacy. He believed his pursuit of racist medical information put him on equal footing with the conspiracy theorists and pseudoscientists he studied in his youth.
Himmler had long desired to be perceived as an intellectual. Now,